Thousands of coal-black clouds hung in the bright gray sky. A rocky terrain stretched before Masai, and a chill blew against him from every direction. In the distance, a golden archway stood built into the dark brown mountain range. A series of crags and canyons lay scattered between Masai and the archway. The unmistakable forms and shapes of people moved within the canyons. Masai's stomach clenched. He thought,
"So this is the land of the dead. How dreary."
A profound perfume of rot lingered in the air, and a constant melody of moaning drifted all around him. The moaning drilled into Masai's ears, and madness tickled the barest edges of his mind. Masai regarded the item he held in his hands. A full-length bronze staff with the symbol of an ankh as its headpiece. He twirled it about and felt its exceptional balance. Masai even tested the staff's durability by bending the staff against his knee. A deep chill crawled up his back, and Masai glanced behind him. He stood on the edge of an abrupt cliff that overlooked a vast array of black clouds. Vertigo and nausea swept about Masai's head, so he returned his attention toward the golden archway. He remained quiet as he moved towards it, but he gripped his staff tightly. The path that he strode upon descended deeply into the crevices, and any light given off by the gray sky was considered dim at best. Surely the hidden recesses of the canyons would be painted in shade. The path leveled out once Masai got to the floor between the crevices, and a cluster of 4 people leaned against the canyon walls. They were all naked, and their skin appeared overly stretched over their flesh, like tanned leather. Gaunt expressions covered their faces, and their movements were twitchy and jerking. None of them had noticed Masai yet, and they stared off into space, with slackened jaws and vacant-looking eyes. Slowly, Masai crept up toward them. His heart lurched within his chest, and his breaths came in rapid, barely audible bursts. If he could just avoid their attention. One of the creatures locked gazes with him. The grotesque man's lips curved back and revealed rotten teeth. A dark purple tongue licked the outside of his cracked lips. It stared at Masai for only a moment before it drew in breath and let out a horrid, haunting screech. Each of Masai's vertebrae shivered in tension, and Masai lowered himself into a defensive stance. In unison, the other figures regarded Masai with hungry, hatred-filled glares. Saliva dripped from their lips and chins, and they resembled the starving homeless people from the streets of Ijikos. These things were so much more desperate, though. Their greater sense of need slammed into Masai's consciousness, and he stirred in place with discomfort. All at once, they hopped off of the canyon walls and charged Masai with reckless abandon. They reached out for him and bared their teeth like rabid beasts. Masai twirled his staff and struck the creatures as they got closer. He weaved around them and knocked them aside, but the monsters rose to their feet and lunged at him over and over. Masai hit them in the kneecaps and in the sides of the head, but they bounced back without so much as a reduction in their fervor. Dark contusions and wounds appeared where Masai had struck the monsters, and yet they didn't seem to be bothered by injury. Masai ducked under the harrowing arms of one of the figures, and he stop-kicked one of the monster's kneecaps. His foot slammed into the limb with significant force, and the limb wobbled viciously. The monster hobbled away, and its leg had a slight angle where it didn't exist before. So, these monsters could be damaged, but they didn't feel anything. A sense of hope exploded within Masai's soul, and he swung his staff with renewed dedication. The bruises and wounds grew more severe, and black ichor poured from their bodies. Masai snapped one of the monster's legs in twain, right in the broken knee joint. Even though the leg was still connected to the body, it hung lifelessly as the creature made its way toward Masai. One of the figures was a savage, haggard female, and she swiped her clawed hands at Masai. With all of his force, Masai thrusted the headpiece into the center of the woman's face, right between the eyes. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she fell backwards to the ground. Before her body actually hit the canyon floor, her body exploded into a swirling black mist. The mist floated around and then flew up into the sky towards the clouds. The remaining 3 creatures howled, and their movements became more frantic. Masai lunged back and kept swinging when he could. His heart raced. If he died here. Masai drove his ankh into the side of a creature's head. It exploded into a cloud of black smoke. One of the other creatures leapt through the blackness and shoved into Masai. Masai hit the ground, and the other monster hopped on top of him. Its grimy, clawed hands went for his throat, while its fang-filled jaw dove for Masai's face. At the last moment, Masai twisted his body and put the creature on its back. Something flourished on the edge of Masai's vision, and he threw himself to the side. The last creature landed on the first, and its claws buried into the first creature's back. A cloud of black dust swirled around the lone creature as it stood up. Masai charged it and kept swinging at it. When it died like the others, Masai leaned on his staff and took many deep breaths. A small but not completely unexpected smile crept on his face. Had it not been for his father's unwavering demand to train Masai to fight, or his brother's constant desire to beat him into submission when they were children, that fight would have come to a much more abrupt end. His mouth was dry, and his fingers twitched slightly. Absolute death had only been a snake's length away from him. He couldn't afford to fail, and so Masai licked his lips and started moving toward the golden archway again. The rest of the immediate area was abandoned and silent, although the distant roar of a crowd lingered in the distance. The closer that Masai got to the archway, the louder the sounds became. Masai got to a small rise that overlooked a flat plain. The plain itself sat at the base of a hill that ran up to the magnificent golden archway. Now that he was this close, Masai noticed that the archway was not solid gold, but carved with glyphs. 2 large groups of haggard monsters stood clustered in the plains before the archway. Each of the groups of monsters had surrounded single individuals, and the individuals were not malformed or disgusting like the other monsters. They resembled Masai, meaning that they were human, but they had slightly otherworldly glows about them. More of the monsters had surrounded an elderly woman dressed in simple garments, while the smaller cluster of monsters had gathered around a well-dressed man. The well-dressed man had 2 man-sized living statues beside him. Each of the figures had exquisite detail carved into them, and they brandished stone weapons. The stone figures kept circling around the well-dressed man and swinging at the monsters. The monsters had not fully advanced on either the old woman or the man, and strangely, they kept a wider berth away from the woman even though she was alone. Masai clenched his gut as he ran toward the back of the monsters. He twirled his staff and struck monsters in the back of the heads, right where the napes of the necks met the skulls. With excessive force, Masai shoved the monsters to the ground and barreled past them. Within a minute, Masai had maneuvered over to the woman. The monsters shrieked out, and they stepped closer to both Masai and the old woman. However, they stopped just outside Masai's staff-striking range. The woman had been crouching with her head covered with her hands, but she glanced up at Masai. Tears trailed down her cheeks.
You don't look like the others. And I don't have a guardian. What's going on?
The monsters took another step, and their frenzy intensified all the more. Masai twirled his staff defensively.
I'm not here to hurt you. I'll do my best to protect you.
One of the monsters got too close, so Masai buried the Ankh headpiece into its face. A female creature grabbed his staff, but Masai twisted it out of her grasp and then shoved her away. He started swinging wildly, and the monsters fell to the ground. Slowly, they got back up. Masai pointed to the well-dressed man.
Send your guardians to attack, and we can get through this together.
He thrusted his staff into a creature's throat. In that instant, Masai put everything he had into the strike. His strength, his hope to protect the woman and survive the trial, his fear of dying, and his devotion to serving the people of Ijikos in the best possible manner. All of it flowed into the staff. The Ankh headpiece glowed with a brilliant obsidian-colored hue. As it struck the monster's throat, its foul body began to bubble. The skin popped like boiling water, and an instant later, the monster melted into a cloud of dust. An awful stench saturated the air, and it heightened the other monster's rage. The old woman cowered in place, and she stared at Masai. The dark shimmering spread all over the entire length of Masai's staff, but it faded when Masai stopped feeding his thoughts into the weapon. Multiple hands reached for him, and once more, Masai twirled his staff. He poured all of his anxiety and fear into the staff, and it illuminated once more. Onyx fire coated his weapon. As its shaft collided with the wretched abominations, their skin boiled, and then they melted into dust. One of the creatures raked its claws against Masai's neck. Pain seared through his nerves, but Masai gritted through the tension. He drove the end of the staff into the monster's foot, and then it became dust. More monsters reached for him, and their dagger-like fingertips barely missed nicking his skin. Masai only had to hold on a little longer. Just long enough for the well-dressed man to... The well-dressed man sprinted toward the Golden Arch, and his pair of stone warriors trailed his wake. None of the monsters were chasing the fleeing man, nor were they even looking in their direction. All eyes were on Masai and the old woman. Or rather, all eyes were on Masai.
You coward!
Masai smacked another monster, and then another, and then another. With each explosion of dust, another insane creature stepped up to harm Masai. Thank the light that none of the horrid things actually went after the old woman. She crouched on the ground with her hands over her head and her eyes closed. Tears streamed down her face. Masai's blood surged through his veins like a flooded river, and his muscles ached from consistent and unyielding abuse. He couldn't stop them, and he couldn't slow down. Slowing down meant never waking up and being forever barred from R. The last monster dissipated violently. Masai whirled around to behold the old woman, but he stopped as they locked eyes. She crawled on her back and she wept, and she moved away from Masai.
Anakanti, have mercy on me. Please don't kill me. I want to go to R and join my husband.
Masai held his hand out toward her.
I'm not here to hurt you. I promise. Please, calm down.
You murdered all of those poor souls. They exploded into dust. They weren't attacking me, they were asking for help. And you killed them.
How can I kill something that's already dead? They'll come back down from those black clouds eventually, I'm sure.
And how do you know that?
The old woman spat at him.
How do I know you're not going to melt my skin too?
My name is Masai Iados, and I am currently undergoing the trial of the Acolyte. I assume you're on your way to Anakanti's palace for judgment, right?
The old woman stopped where she lay, and she frowned at him. Her eyes reflected a bright sense of clarity, soaked in a thick oil of weariness.
Wait. You're trying to be a cleric of Anaconti?
Masai nodded.
I'm not dead, and I'm not here to hurt you.
Slowly, the woman got to her feet. She pointed to Masai's staff.
I've seen that symbol before. On the temples of Lady Death. It's the Great Ankh.
The design is similar, but it's nothing like that holy relic. Please don't be scared of me.
He reached out to her. She crept closer and poked Masai's arm with an icy finger.
Where are you from?
Masai gave her a pleasant smile.
Ijikos. How about you?
Erd. I was born and died in Erd. My name is Shanita.
It's nice to meet you. I see you were given a basic burial, right? You don't seem to have any guardians to protect you.
A dark expression painted itself on Shanita's face.
I was supposed to have a moderate funeral, right? With a single guardian. But something must have happened. My son told me he would take care of everything. But here I am. Defenseless with only the most basic spells to keep the crazed ones at bay. I thought you were supposed to be able to feel the magic spells cast on you. I don't feel anything.
Masai's eyes fell downcast.
If there were spells cast on you other than the very basic prayers and incantations, you should have been able to feel them. I'm going to bet the only thing that kept those monsters at bay was the virtue of your soul.
But will that be enough to get me to Anaconti's palace? Before I died, the clerics in Erd told me of what to expect. They told me that as I pass through each archway, the path to Lady Death will become more dangerous. That's why I was supposed to have one guardian. I'll be denied R for sure.
Masai reached over and caressed her older face.
You will get to R. I will make sure of it. I'm heading that way. So how about I serve as your guardian?
Shanita's eyes narrowed, and yet amidst her enormous sense of suspicion, a great deal of fear and anxiousness wavered about as well.
Why are you so determined to help me? Don't get me wrong, I am grateful for your charity. But in life, I had one hard experience after another. What's in it for you?
I'm joining the Order of Anaconti, so I can help people prepare for the journey to stand before Anaconti. Everyone should get the right to be judged, and everyone should have the opportunity to access R. I believe in that concept so much, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't help you on your path.
For the first time, Shanita smiled.
We live so we may one day die. And through death we prepare ourselves so we may be born again into life. It's a never-ending cycle that feeds into one another over and over again. You obviously hold true to that philosophy, and it makes me want to believe you. You really do want to help me.
Yes, I do.
Masai pointed toward the archway.
Come on. The sooner we get to Anaconti, the sooner you can be reunited with your husband.
Masai started moving toward the archway, where once a great deal of stress and anxiety festered within his chest. A great billowing of ease now comforted him. Masai gripped his staff with a renewed appreciation and reverence, and he openly smiled despite the terrible environment. After a short while, Masai glanced over his shoulder and noticed that Shanita had fallen back about 8 feet behind him. She still trailed him, but she resembled more like a homeless puppy rather than a soul longing for judgment.
Are you okay? You're not hurt, are you?
He stopped and allowed Shanita to catch up with him.
What if we get overwhelmed? You have a magic stick, but I can't do anything to help you if things go badly. I may not get to see my beloved husband.
I know it seems daunting, but that's the point of the journey. Not everything can be festivals and frivolity. There are challenges that have to be overcome.
Masai placed a hand on her shoulder.
Let me ask you, did you lead a good or bad life?
Her shoulders squared.
I did the best I could. Yes, I've made more than a few mistakes in my lifetime. But for the most part, I think I lived a pretty good life.
Then you shouldn't be worried about being able to stand before Anaconti. You had the courage to live your life to the best of your ability. Now have the courage to walk through the land of the dead, so you may be reborn.
Masai gestured back over his shoulder.
Do you remember how the monsters kept away from you?
Shanita frowned.
Things were so intense, I honestly don't recall that detail.
I remember it. They kept a wide berth away from you because for the most part, they couldn't get near you. If they did get close, they never tried touching you. You could have walked past them, and all they would have done was scream at you.
Then how come they attacked you?
I'm not like you. I'm not emitting the energy of my virtue. Besides, I attacked them first.
Her eyes started to sparkle a little more.
Does that mean we can ignore all of the dead we come across?
Masai grimaced.
If only it were that easy. Things might get better, or they might get worse, depending on how things go at the archways. That's why having guardians is so important. Even if your virtues were akin to sainthood, you could still run the risk of being attacked. That's why the rich man had 2 of them.
Tears outlined the bottom of Shanita's eyes.
So I might die closer to the palace then?
Masai shook his head.
I believe everything happens for a reason. I was meant to take my trial today, just as I was meant to come to your aid. With my last breath, I will do everything I can to protect you, so you can stand before Anakanti.
You're right.
Shanita let out a heavy sigh.
If I linger here feeling scared and sorry for myself, I'll never move forward. I'll end up like those poor crazed monsters, won't I? They were too afraid to go forward and just stopped.
Masai nodded.
According to the lore, the land of the dead has disastrous effects on souls who linger here. It's a maddening place that corrupts and twists the forms of those who lack the courage to face the obstacles. Their sanity snaps, and they become, as you saw, mindless, frenzied monsters.
Thank you so much. I would be lost without you.
You can thank me when we get to the palace. Let's go.
A great length of time passed, and Masai and Shanita finally arrived at the base of the massive golden archway. Impossibly high mountain peaks stretched for as far as the eye could see, and the only way forward was through the golden archway. Giant glyphs covered its surface, and at the base of the archway sat 2 giant golden jackal statues. They towered over Masai and Shanita as they approached. The statues watched them with deep blue sapphire eyes. Once they got close enough, the jackals spoke in unison.
Only the dead may be questioned by the archway. Pass through with your eyes closed, or risk having your soul burned out. You, the dead one, you will wait until he has passed through.
Masai turned back to Shanita.
I'll wait for you on the other side.
He started to walk with his eyes closed, but Shanita called out to him.
What's going to happen when I pass through the archway?
The jackal statues answered before Masai could.
This is the first gate of judgment, the gate of the greatest joy. As you pass through it, you will see your most significant joy. If it is virtuous, your soul will glow brighter. If it is not, your soul will glow darker. The brighter your soul is, the less likely the punished will try and absorb you. When you are ready and after this living one is passed through, walk through the gate with your eyes open.
Masai rushed through the gate. As he passed under it, needles of magical energy stabbed into every pore and nerve ending. A sense of violation and humbleness fell over him, but at least it didn't hurt. The jackals called out.
Pass through the gate.
Shanita walked under the archway. As she did, the glyphs on the archway glowed with bright crimson light. A loud, dull hum rang through the air. Shanita's eyes took on the color of the glyphs, and it gave her an otherworldly appearance. The red energy swallowed her irises. Her body shuddered as she took the final steps beyond the archway's reach. Masai approached her, and he held her steady. Shanita's skin glimmered with a slightly brighter hue.
Are you all right? You're crying.
Shanita reached up and touched her face. She rubbed the tears into her skin.
Am I? I suppose that makes sense. I saw the birth of my son. It was so wonderful to experience it again. I feel so much better about this trip.
You appear more relaxed, and that's a good sign. The better you feel, the easier our journey will be.
How many more gates are there? 2? 3?
There are 5 gates in total. We passed through the first one, so there are 4 more after this one. The first is the Gate of the Greatest Joy. The next gates, in succession, are the Gate of the Greatest Sorrow, the Gate of the Greatest Mercy, the Gate of the Greatest Betrayal, and lastly, the Gate of the Greatest Regret.
Shanita's joy fell from her face.
I really don't like the sounds of any of those gates. I just relived my greatest joy. Does that mean I have to relive all those other things too?
Yes. You have to have those events burned onto your soul, so when Anakanti judges you, she can see all those aspects for herself.
Her face blanched.
I don't want to experience those things again. It was bad enough having to live through them once. I just want to be reunited with my husband. It's not fair.
Masai frowned.
I'm sure it won't be that bad. After all, you said you lived a good life.
Not that bad. How can you say that? You don't really know anything about me.
Shanita waved her arms about as tears trailed down her cheeks.
You have no idea what it's like to live an entire lifetime with the idea that your transition to R is supposed to be peaceful, only to learn you have to go through a series of 5 hoops before you can gain peace.
She pointed at him.
And you say it won't be that bad.
She glared at him.
I know you didn't mean any harm, but try and understand how hard this is going to be for me. I'm tired, and all I want to do is rest. Now, I have to endure this one last trial before I can hold my husband again. It's no simple feat. It's incredibly dangerous. I'm not an adventurer. I'm a weary old person.
Think of it like this. You are going to finally shed your mortal form for a divine form. And each time you relive one of these moments, you cast it away forever. It never has to bother you again. And yet, you can still hold on to those wondrous memories of those events.
Masai rested a hand on her shoulder.
And you're not alone. I'm here to help you cope with your feelings about whatever you experience. I'll do my best to get you to the palace.
You really will be there for me, won't you?
Masai nodded.
Okay, young man. Lead the way.
Shanita followed behind him, and she had a little more determination in her step.
So why do you want to be a cleric of Anakanti?
I want to help prepare people for their journeys to R.
Shanita flashed him a knowing smile.
That sounds pretty noble. But what's the real reason?
Masai peered at her.
Excuse me? What do you mean?
She let out an earthy chuckle.
I've lived a long time. I've raised a son, too. I know what motivates young people, especially young people like you. My son was a tomb builder. He loved building tombs and became quite renowned at it. If you asked him, he would tell you his life's passion was to carve out the final resting places for people. That's not why he got into tomb building in the first place.
So why did he get into tomb building?
My son really wanted to impress my husband. Not only that, but he also wanted to impress a young tomb inspector. That tomb inspector would one day become my son's husband. So, why are you really becoming a cleric of Anakanti? Is it to gain family approval?
Masai rolled his eyes.
The only family member whose opinion matters is my little sister's. She supports me. My father and brothers hate my career choice and gave me so much grief for it.
Masai grinded his teeth together in silent rage.
They only tolerated the fact that I was becoming a cleric because they thought I would follow the path of the cat. If it helps the military, then they love it. Anything else is beneath us.
I'm sorry to hear that. So is there a girl or a boy you're trying to impress?
A sudden heat festered in Masai's cheeks, and Shanita yelled out with excitement.
Ha! I knew it! Young people are so easy to figure out. So, what's his or her name?
I don't know her name. All I know is that she's a cleric of Anakanti.
Masai averted his eyes, which only made Shanita all the more delighted.
So how did you meet this mysterious cleric?
My brothers played a cruel trick on me when I was 9. To make a long story short, I found myself alone in an necropolis at night, surrounded by angry necropolis guardians.
So what happened?
She saved me. She commanded the jackals to run away or scared them off. I have no idea which.
Masai took a deep breath and grinned from ear to ear.
She took me to her hut and watched over me while I slept. During the night, I woke up several times thinking the jackals were going to come and eat me. Each and every time, she was there to sing me back to sleep.
And that was when you were a little boy?
A mischievous grin covered Shanita's face.
So you're into older women, are you? How interesting.
Masai's face grew hotter.
It's not like that. We had a wonderful time eating food and talking. She told me secrets of the Anakanti Order, things that the public didn't know.
Shanita's eyes got wide.
Really? What kinds of secrets? Am I allowed to know?
Masai shrugged.
I don't see why not. You're not going to share these secrets with anyone.
As he said it, something caught his eye. A large group of monsters stood and glared at them as they approached. As Masai and Shanita got closer to them, they either remained where they were, or they retreated backwards. The distance was slightly greater than it had been when Masai had first found Shanita. The horrid abominations didn't scream out, but they watched Masai and Shanita with cold, black eyes. Masai's spine shivered.
Wow. They really can't get near you.
Masai smiled.
That makes this so much easier.
Shanita shook her head.
I'm glad they're not attacking us, but they're still annoying. I hope I do as well on the other gates. So, as you were saying, what are some of the Anakanti secrets?
Masai walked beside her, and together they moved through the crowd. Over 50 twisted, malformed souls watched them, silently, but with greedy, envious eyes.
For one thing, the Zur aren't a radical group, nor are they evil. The general public just thinks they are, and it suits the Zur just fine.
Shanita's eyes opened a little wider, and she gaped at Masai with childlike rapt attention.
Really? Are you serious? But they raised the dead and turned them into zombie servants. How is that not evil?
The Zur only exist to turn those who fail the Acolyte's test, and those who fail their eternal judgments into zombies. Their souls are split into two halves. Half of the soul goes with the zombie body to be tortured in the physical realm for all eternity. The other half of the soul is brought here to live the rest of the time as one of the punished.
Shanita pointed to one of the crazed female-like monsters drooling outside of the bubble's protection.
You mean to tell me those people are half-souls?
No. Those people are merely the souls of the people who are too afraid to pass through the gates. They've lingered in the land of the dead for too long. They forgot themselves and lost their minds. Now they have to remain here like this. The fear of being judged is still alive and well in their minds.
Shanita frowned.
Wait, so if they aren't the punished, then who is?
We've not encountered the punished yet. To be honest, I have no idea what they look like.
Masai observed the path ahead.
Beyond general lore, it is forbidden to speak of what goes on during the trial of the Acolyte.
Shanita stayed silent as they walked through the crowd. Some of the monsters followed them as closely as they could, but others simply gave up. After a long while, she spoke again.
What else did the woman tell you?
Well, let me think. It's been a very long time since I thought about that night in great detail. aside from her face and the way she made me feel.
Masai gripped his staff tighter.
She told me the gods and goddesses all live in Ar, but Anakanti is stationed in the land of the dead. She also told me the Zur have bishops and a cardinal, but the cardinal is as high as the offices go.
She knew a lot about the Zur, didn't she? Are you sure she wasn't one of them?
Masai stopped in his tracks, and a cold numbness flared within his chest and stomach. Shanita stopped beside him, and she watched with an unreadable expression. She broke the silence by saying,
Think about it. She saved you and convinced you the Zur are misunderstood and they're actually good. You become more motivated to see them in a positive light and become a cleric of the main order that hosts them. Are you sure you're not going to be recruited to be an agent of evil?
The Zur don't actually do anything in public. All their activities are clandestine.
Maybe not in the south, but in the north it's a different story.
Shanita started moving again.
I've personally seen the Zur attack people at the festival of Arcos in Erd. Amidst the black-robed men and women stood ghastly mummified monsters. Forgive me, let's change the subject. I don't care to hear about any more of this woman's mysteries.
A white-hot rage ignited in his throat.
You don't know anything about her. She saved me and watched over me while I slept. Evil people don't care about scared little kids. You're wrong.
Shanita held up her hands.
Whoa, I'm sorry I upset you. I didn't mean to strike a nerve. Now I'm the one creating offense. You're right. I don't know her. Maybe I'm wrong.
Masai winced and then bit the bottom of his lip.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you.
She simpered at him.
Let's forget it even happened. We both want to get to the palace, so let's focus on that. The next gateway is up ahead as well. Which one is this again?
It's the gate of the greatest sorrow.
Masai pointed back to the crowd of twisted souls. Each of the malformed creatures had stopped following them, and they no longer gazed at them longingly either. The monsters stared at the gate with wide expressions, and fear radiated within their black eyes. They visually quaked in their place, and many started to retreat away from the golden archway.
It seems the closer we get to the archway, the safer we become.
I don't feel safe. I feel sick. Let's get this over with. I already know what I'm going to see.
Shanita took the lead and moved toward the pair of golden statues. As expected, the pair of jackal statues gave the same spiel the first pair did. Masai turned to Shanita.
Just like last time. I will wait for you.
He closed his eyes and moved through the archway rapidly. As soon as he moved through, Masai turned around and watched Shanita. When she passed under the archway, the glyph splashed, her body glowed, and she emerged from the other side crying. Unlike the last time, her tears carried sorrow rather than joy. Masai held his arms open and she collapsed into them. Her wailing and shrieks made him wince, but he held her while she bawled. When her sobs subsided to a dull series of whimpers, Masai peered down at her.
What did you see?
Shanita wiped her tears and snot on Masai's shirt. He didn't mind.
I had to relive my husband's death. He died during a Hirosishian raid. I can still smell the stink of their horse flesh and hear the sound of their war chants. I hope all of those damned centaurs die from a plague.
Masai held her until she finally stepped away from him.
The next one is mercy, isn't it?
I think so. At least it's an easy one. You're glowing brighter. That's saying something, right?
Shanita scoffed.
An easy one. Oh, to be young and naive. You'll learn one day giving mercy to those around you is more challenging and complicated than just being nice and doing favors for people. No, dear Masai, the next gate won't be an easy one.
You're saying that because you're upset. I'm sure we'll be fine.
Masai gave her his most reassuring smile. Shanita just glowered at him. They continually walked up a steep incline, and they stopped within the sight of a mountain top. The third archway was embedded within the actual stone, and it led into a deep tunnel that entered the mountain. Just like the previous archway, the glyphs radiated with arcane mystery. However, a small commotion of noise and shouting started to get louder the closer that Masai and Shanita got to the archway. Someone screamed. A host of roars echoed in the scream's wake.
What in the name of Allah is going on? Should we check it out?
Stay here. I'll check it out.
Masai smiled.
Maybe we can help another poor soul.
Shanita smiled and crouched beside a large boulder. Masai ran on ahead, and his stomach clenched in on itself. With her enhanced virtue casting a large radius of protection, Shanita would be fine. Masai, on the other hand, was very much vulnerable. He had his staff, but would that be enough to protect him and the other poor individual being beset by the denizens of this land? Masai climbed over a ridge and beheld the troubling spectacle. Over 100 monsters surrounded a trio of individuals, or rather, a well-dressed man and his 2 guardians. Large cracks ran up and down the guardian's skin, and one of the living statues was missing its left arm. The well-dressed man had wide eyes completely dominated by terror. A slight darkness had gathered around the man's body, and the light dimmed around him. A dreaded fire built up in Masai's chest, and he turned back around. When he got back up to Shanita, she gazed at him wonderingly.
You're back, but the person is still screaming.
Masai didn't even try to hide his scowl.
I'm not going to risk my life for someone who left us for dead. Let's go.
Shanita followed him with her eyes for a moment, and then she trailed him with a sullen expression.
It was that well-dressed fellow, wasn't it? It's too bad we couldn't do more to help him despite his selfish behavior. I hope Anakanti doesn't punish us for our lack of compassion.
Masai led the way up to the path, and under his breath, he muttered.
I hope so too.
When they approached the third gate, the jackals began to speak. However, Masai cut them off.
Yes, I already know what you're going to say. I walk through first with my eyes closed, and then she follows. Done this twice already.
One of the jackals turned his head to face the other one.
Obviously, someone never learned it's rude to interrupt someone when they're talking.
The other jackal kept staring at Masai.
Well, get on with it then if you're so clever.
Masai crossed the gate and then watched Shanita pass under the archway. Shanita trembled with each step, and the red light blanketed over her. At first, Masai didn't notice the difference, but the longer he stared at her, the more certain he became. Shanita had become dimmer.